From the News Channel 5 Network, this is SportsLine.
Hey there, SportsLine on your television. Steve Layman here with you. Glad you are here with us tonight on News Channel 5 Plus. Lots of things we can get to tonight, and our phone lines are open as always. 737-7767 if you'd like to join in on the conversation. The Predators returning from the All-Star break tonight. They are tied at the end of one period in Dallas against the Stars at 1. Michael McCarron with the goal for the Preds on a redirection of an Eeli Tolvanen shot. The Preds start the second half of the season in second place, both in the Central Division and in the Western Conference, trailing only the Colorado Avalanche. The Stars, of course, becoming a rival here as of late. They battled in that playoff series a couple of years ago. They were in the Winter Classic. The Stars have gotten the upper hand of both of those. And so this is kind of a growing rivalry and a big game tonight because at the moment the Stars are on the outside looking in at the playoff picture. And as we mentioned, the Preds significantly above them in the Central. So big game for the Stars to get going. A good game for the Preds to try to jumpstart the second half of their season and continue the great work they've done already this year. It has been a remarkable start to the season for the Predators, and John Hynes, he's got this team playing well with great effort, with great energy, and buying into what they want to do as a team. And when you look individually, because that has to be a part of it. Yes, it is about the system. Yes, it's about how you work. Yes, it's about your goaltending. And the Preds have gotten great goaltending from all-star UC Saros. But it is also about having your best players step up in the best moments. I think it was last week we heard Mike Vrabel talk about how the Titans in the playoffs the last couple of years, the best players have not necessarily played their best, whether that be Ryan Tannehill or Derrick Henry, who obviously this year was coming back from the injury. But when those guys don't play at their best in the most important time, it becomes difficult to win. And we've seen that the last few years with the Predators, where their best players, they've oftentimes won in spite of them. Those guys have not delivered at the way that they were expected to, and so the team had to kind of rally around, circle the wagons, and overcome that. Well, this year, that's not the case. Ryan Johansson is playing like a top-line center this year. Philip Forsberg is on pace to shatter the team scoring record. Matt Duchene is hot on his heels. You've got other guys playing really well as well. Roman Josi, all-star performance, might win the Norris Trophy. The best players on this team are playing like the best players on this team. And that's a credit to John Hynes and certainly a credit to those guys. And that's a big reason why the Predators are in the situation that they are right now. College basketball ramping up as the calendar flips into February now. Tennessee just about to tip off in Starkville tonight against Mississippi State. It'll be the Vols' first game without Olivier Kamwa, who suffered an ankle injury on Saturday and will have what is believed to be season-ending surgery. Brandon Huntley-Hatfield in the starting lineup tonight. The Vols, of course, playing great with the guard combination, the freshmen, Kennedy Chandler and Zakai Ziegler, the much less heralded of the two freshman recruits, both playing really well at the moment. They've got a huge challenge tonight against maybe the best guard in the league in Iverson Molinar of Mississippi State. Ben Holland's team playing well, especially at home. So a challenge for Tennessee as the Vols look to win a sixth consecutive SEC game. Vanderbilt, a big win last night. The Commodores knocked off Missouri 70-62 at home. Scottie Pippen Jr. with 19. Quentin Malora-Brown and Jordan Wright both had double-doubles. The Commodores got out to a lead. Missouri had a run, actually took the lead with about 5 minutes to go, and Vanderbilt finished on an 11-1 run. Hit a bunch of free throws. Scottie Pippen Jr. with a big shot during that stretch, and Vanderbilt was able to close out that game and get to 5-6. And just to put that in perspective, yes, it's below 500. Yes, this team is still 13-10. But to consider what Jerry Stackhouse is doing this year with this squad, think back to this. Over the last 3 seasons in the SEC, Vanderbilt basketball has won a total of 6 games. A total of 6 games in 3 seasons. 0 and then 3 each of the last 2 years. Vanderbilt will have a chance on Saturday in Knoxville against Tennessee to equal that this season. and seemingly will probably surpass that almost certainly over the final month of the regular season. This team this year probably not going to the NCAA tournament, probably not going to have a postseason. But the improvement is obvious with the squad. And it'll just be a matter of, can Jerry Stackhouse translate this into some recruiting and then piece together a new team? Because Scottie Pippen Jr. will be gone after this season. Can that new team keep up the pace from where this team has developed into? As a big question. We can talk about any of those topics, 737-7767. But I want to start tonight with essentially Roger Goodell's State of the NFL address today outside SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, of course, the site of Super Bowl 56 on Sunday. He does this every year for about an hour. Well, maybe make some brief remarks and then take questions from the assembled media about the major topics around the NFL and its franchises and the state of the game right now. And it seems like over the last few years, these addresses have gotten more problematic in some ways. They've just become more about the issues facing the league, whether it be Colin Kaepernick's decision to kneel, whether it be the COVID issues that have happened over the last couple of years, and now this year, on the heels of last year too, by the way, this year, all about Brian Flores' lawsuit last week and the alleged racial discrimination when it comes to the hiring and firing of particularly coaches, but also general managers and administrators throughout teams and the league office with the NFL. That was the number one question asked last year at this event, and it was the number one question asked this year, and it continued to be the main topic of questions, just asked in different ways and in different facets throughout much of the hour. More than half of the questions were directed to Roger Goodell about the hiring of minority coaches, about retaining minority coaches, about the Rooney Rule and the interview process, about what the league can specifically do about it. That was pretty much the entire day. And some of the comments that Goodell addressed included the fact that they need to have a healthy dialogue all the time at the league. He noted the fact that they've changed the Rooney Rule multiple times since its inception in 2003 in an effort to best make the practices for interviewing, hiring, firing, all those sorts of things when it comes to coaches in the NFL. And so he thinks it's a healthy dialogue at this point. He spoke specifically about the Flores lawsuit in saying that he doesn't want to touch the legal process because that will take place in a courtroom and lawyers will do that. But he did hint to what the NFL's initial statement was last week, that they believe the legal part of the case is without merit, that there is no evidence there that there was racial discrimination in the case of Brian Flores' firing in Miami, him not getting hired in New York, or not getting hired in an interview in Denver early on a couple of years ago. They believe that's without merit, but they do believe, again, that it needs to start a process within the NFL or continue a process that they have to talk about this and they have to work things out within the league to try to make this better. He pointed out that the Rooney Rule has done its job in the fact, and there will be people who dispute this, but it's hard. So the Rooney Rule itself says that whenever you have a coaching, either head coach or a coordinator position or a general manager position open, you have to interview at least one external minority candidate before you can make a hire. And we talked about that last week with the Brian Daboll hire with the New York Giants. That was one of Flores' complaints, right? Is that the Giants hired Brian Daboll, who had worked closely with the new GM, Joe Shane, who came from Buffalo, worked with Daboll there. He needed an offensive coordinator as they try to salvage Daniel Jones, a first-round draft pick from a couple of years ago. Daboll seems like the guy. It made sense in the hire. But according to the text messages of Bill Belichick, it seems like that hire had already been agreed to be made before Flores actually went in and did his interview. That seems to be against the heart of what the Rooney Rule is supposed to be all about. Well, Goodell said today, not asked specifically about that situation, but just the Rooney Rule in general, does it work? Does it work? And the two sides of that, of course, are you getting the minority candidates in for the interviews? And the answer to that is clearly yes. They have to, by rule. They are getting the chance to interview. Their name is getting out there at a minimum if they don't get the job, and that hopefully opens up opportunities for each individual candidate moving forward. But then on the flip side, there will be the people who say it isn't, because at the moment there are only 3 black and 5 minority head coaches in the National Football League out of 32 jobs. There are 7 black GMs in the league out of 32 jobs. We can get into the math on that coming up here in a little bit, but it's interesting where you fall on the line there, because there will be some people who say, well, the rule did what it's supposed to do. Other people say it obviously didn't go far enough because the end goal wasn't met. And that's where Goodell kind of straddled the line here today, is because he said, look, the Rooney Rule has gotten the opportunity out there because we're getting more than just one minority candidate in the door on interviews per job. Not every job, but when you go look at every job out there, they're getting multiple minority candidates in for the interview process. But they aren't seeing the end result. They're not seeing the outcome, is the exact word that Goodell said. And he said, so we have to find a way to make the opportunity reach the right outcome. We'll come back to that in a moment. But a few more things that he talked about continuing with that is making it an effort throughout the league, putting people in the right spot, and then allowing them to be successful. He also talked about the growth of the game itself. 200 million fans domestically in a country of 330 million. But the NFL now wants to grow with record ratings and record revenue. It's about the growth globally at this point. So next season, the NFL will play 5 games on international soil. They will play 3 more games in London, as they've done consistently here in recent years. They will go back to Mexico City for the first time since 2019 and play a game there at Stadia Azteca. And they will go to Bayern Munich, the great football power, their stadium, Munich, Germany. First ever game in Germany next year, the first of 4 consecutive seasons in which the NFL will play a game on German soil. They'll play 2 in Munich, 2 in Frankfurt, as they kind of bring that country into the fold in terms of the NFL brand as well. So they want to expand, they want to continue the growth, and they talked a lot about the media rights and direct broadcasting media as well. And then the final thing he talked about goes back to the Brian Flores suit, and this he got pressed on as well. Actually, there are 2 more topics. This one, though, from Flores, was the allegation that while in Miami, he was essentially offered to be paid by Dolphins owner Stephen Ross to tank games during his first season in an effort to try to get the #1 draft pick. And Flores says, I did not do that. I did not try to do that. We didn't do that. But that was an offer on the table, was cash to tank games. And Goodell said, frankly, that he doesn't know where the facts will lead in that investigation. They are going to thoroughly look into it and find out what they can, but that the NFL takes that matter very seriously. And anything that has to do with the competitive integrity of the game is of the utmost importance. And so they will look into it. And if they find something like that, it will be handled very seriously. A follow-up question asked, if something like that happened, is it within the NFL bylaws that the other owners could kick out an existing owner? And Goodell said that yes, it could happen. So again, that was one of the things I said last week. We don't know how the Flores thing's going to shake out in terms of the racial allegations about his job, about being fired or not being hired. We don't know how that will work out with Brian Flores. It's a conversation that's definitely happening. But will he be a winner in a courtroom with the facts on his side about that? I don't know if we know. But if he is right and can prove that there were bribes being offered to him to tank games from an NFL owner, I mean, that is like the scandal of the century when it comes to football. And when it comes to sports, frankly. When you think about the NFL and the billions of dollars that are wrapped up to it, and frankly, the partnerships that have happened in the last few years between the NFL and sports gambling and these online sites, including one that was a startup partially invested by Dolphins owner Stephen Ross, the owner alleged to have tried to put the bribe out for tampering here. I mean, that rises to a very high level of concern for the league and probably a criminal level of concern for Ross if it can be proven to be true. That is a massive story, and I know it has dominated the headlines this week in Los Angeles for a lot of these sports talk radio shows out there, because that comes to the very heart of the game that we watch every week, and that will be something very interesting to watch. So those are some of the thoughts from Roger Goodell. I'll dive back into some of the conversation around the coaching hiring aspect of this, because I think it's challenging, and I think it's something that even if you're not a diehard NFL fan or not invested in Brian Flores, it's an interesting thing to consider, because it is a noble cause that does not have an easy answer. And I almost cringed at times watching Goodell having to answer all the questions as a one-man spokesperson today. I think he did the best he could, but there is no easy answer to satisfy the questions that are coming in. And that is the enormous challenge in front of the NFL moving in front of him. And it's also the challenge for us, I think, as a society that we have to deal with. So we'll tackle that. We'll get to your phone calls as well. 737-7767, the number. This is SportsLine, and you're watching News Channel 5 Plus.